Alright, buckle up, y'all, 'cause we're diving headfirst into a story that'll make your Lone Star belt buckle rattle. Picture this, deep space, the kind of black that stretches out further than a Texas highway in July, dotted with stars like scattered diamonds on velvet. Out here, amongst nebulae that paint the void with colors you ain't never seen, lies New Hope Prime. Think of it as the Austin of this particular galactic sector, a haven for art, for science, for folks who'd rather write a symphony than load a plasma cannon. The settlers of New Hope, that's what they called themselves, a civilization that had traded their war paint for paintbrushes centuries ago. Their cities were marvels of organic architecture, glowing softly against the lush, alien landscape, their ships elegant silver birds gliding through the cosmos. A real paradise, peaceful as a Sunday morning. Yeah, well, peace has a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention in this old galaxy. One rotation, without so much as a howdy-do, the sky above New Hope Prime just tore open. Not like a clean hyperspace jump, more like reality itself got ripped and stitched back together wrong. And out of that jagged wound slid the Scourge. Their ships, the Obliterators, weren't built. They looked grown, like obsidian nightmares given form. Hulls so black they seemed to drink the starlight, absorbing every sensor scan the panicked settlers threw at them. They moved with a silent, chilling precision, a predatory grace that spoke of countless conquests. Nobody knew where they came from, this locust swarm of a species, only that their arrival meant one thing: the end. The New Hope Defense Fleet, bless their hearts, scrambled. 17 capital ships, sleek and proud, vessels like the Eternal Beacon and the Dawn Star, names that spoke of hope and exploration. They were armed, sure, with energy projectors and shield arrays that had kept pirates and petty squabbles at bay for generations. But against the Scourge, it was like bringing a Bowie knife to a tank fight. The Scourge didn't even seem to register their attacks. One by one, those proud settler ships just vanished. No dramatic explosions like in the Holovids, just a flicker, a distortion, and then nothing. 17 capital ships, 40,000 souls snuffed out like birthday candles in a hurricane. Not a single distress call got through the Scourge's oppressive jamming field. Just silence. A cold, empty, terrifying silence that settled over New Hope Prime like a shroud. On the bridge of the INS Starlight, the last surviving command vessel, Commander Miguel Vasquez could only watch, his normally vibrant emerald scales flattening against his skull in a gesture of profound, species-specific grief. 3 centuries he'd served, watched New Hope blossom. Now he was watching it burn. His tactical officer, a young Xylotian whose antennae twitched uncontrollably, delivered the grim reports, his voice barely a whisper. The Eternal Beacon, confirmed destroyed, Commander. The Dawnstar picket line, no response. Orbital defense platforms failing sector by sector. We're exposed. Vasquez, a veteran who'd seen his share of border skirmishes, but nothing like this, felt a cold dread seep into his very core. The Scourge weren't just conquerors, they were cosmic locusts, devourers of civilizations. Tales whispered in the dark corners of cantinas spoke of their processing. Worlds stripped bare, populations rendered down, their very biological and technological essence reforged into the Scourge's grotesque war machine. It was a fate that made simple annihilation seem like a mercy. His people, the artists, the scientists, the dreamers of New Hope, twisted into mindless cogs in an engine of galactic destruction. The thought was unbearable. "Send the emergency beacon," Vasquez ordered, his voice raspy, betraying none of the despair clawing at him. "Full spectrum. All Lone Star Alliance emergency frequencies. Code Omicron." A futile gesture, he knew. The nearest Alliance response fleet, even pushing their engines into the red, was a good 2, maybe 3 standard days away. By then, New Hope Prime would be a hollowed-out husk, another grim monument to the Scourge's relentless advance. But he had to try, for the memory of his crew, for the slim, almost non-existent chance that someone might hear. As the tactical officer complied, his antennae suddenly twitched with a different kind of energy, confusion, not just fear. "Commander," he stammered, triple-checking his readings, I'm detecting an anomalous energy signature. Vector 7-3 approaching fast. It's not broadcasting any recognized Alliance identification codes." A flicker of something cold and hard sparked in Vasquez's weary eyes. More Scourge reinforcements, then. Come to finish the job. It figured. Overwhelm and obliterate, that was their way. "No, sir," the officer replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. "The energy signature it's unlike anything in our databanks. It's chaotic, powerful but unrefined. Almost primitive, yet off the charts. And it's not Scourge configuration. Before Vasquez could process that, the main view screen, still scarred from a near miss, flickered and shifted, focusing on the incoming contact. What appeared wasn't another obsidian nightmare, nor was it one of the sleek, familiar shapes of the Alliance. This was something else entirely. A massive, rectangular hull, brutally functional, scarred and pitted in ways that spoke of past, vicious engagements. It was a study in aggressive utilitarianism, bristling with what could only be weapon emplacements, each one looking like it could crack a small moon. There were no aesthetic considerations, no concessions to form over function. It looked less like a starship and more like a heavily armed, very angry flying brick, a relic from a bygone era of warfare, somehow dragged into the present and supercharged. It was ugly. It was terrifying. And it was heading straight for the Scourge fleet with a burst of speed that seemed impossible for something of its apparent mass, something that looked like it was carved out of a shipyard in a back alley of the cosmos. Commander Miguel Vasquez, a veteran of countless patrols and a dozen skirmishes, a leader who had faced down pirates and navigated asteroid fields that would make a lesser pilot turn tail, could only stare at the impossible sight on his screen and utter a single, stunned phrase that echoed the bewilderment of his entire bridge crew. What in the Sam Hill is that? That angry flying brick cutting through the void like a runaway Mack truck on a mission? That, my friends, was the United Earth ship Alamo, and on its bridge, things were a damn sight calmer than on the Starlight, though no less intense. Forget polished chrome and holographic interfaces that looked like an art installation. The Alamo's command deck was pure, unadulterated function. Exposed conduits ran alongside reinforced bulkheads, status screens glowed with stark, utilitarian readouts, and the air hummed with the contained power of a barely leashed thunderstorm. And at the heart of it all, strapped into a command chair that looked like it had been salvaged from a decommissioned battle tank, was Admiral Jane Iron Holloway. 53 years old, though the lines etched around her winter sky eyes and the uncompromising set of her jaw spoke of experiences that aged a soul faster than years alone. Her steel-gray hair was cropped close, practical, no nonsense, just like the woman herself. 30 years she'd spent in Earth's old naval forces, back when humanity's biggest squabbles were still confined to one little blue marble. She'd seen the tail end of the unification wars, commanded carrier groups in the contested asteroid belts, and earned her call sign, Iron, not for her inflexibility, but for the unbendable core of resolve that anchored her. When Earth finally looked up and decided it was time to join the galactic neighborhood, or at least peek over the fence, Holloway was the one they tapped to skipper humanity's first, and at that moment, only true interstellar battleship. Her crew, 142 souls, were a reflection of the planet they'd left behind, a vibrant, sometimes chaotic, but ultimately resilient mix. Lieutenant Commander Jax Jackson, her tactical officer, was a cool-headed Texan transplant from New Orleans, his fingers flying over his console with a musician's grace, calling out contacts and trajectories. Around them, young men and women from every walk of life, the best Earth had to offer, moved with an efficient, practiced precision. They weren't like the settlers, who'd had centuries of peace to forget the sharp edges of conflict. They weren't like the Scourge, born into a hive mind of relentless conquest. They were human, and humanity, as a species, had a PhD in fighting. All stations report combat status. Holloway's voice cut through the low hum of the bridge, calm as a West Texas dawn, but with an underlying authority that tolerated no hesitation. Weapons control, get me firing solutions on those Scourge bastards. Shield systems, such as they are, to maximum. Let's give these folks a proper Earth, howdy dot. Jax's voice came back, crisp and professional. Admiral, enemy fleet confirmed. 17 capital-class vessels, looks like Scourge obliterator type, another dozen support ships in high orbit around the planet. Energy signatures match the intel we pulled from our long-range probes. The local defenders, they're down to one heavily damaged command ship, looks like the Starlight. Planetary surface is taking a pounding, ma'am. Multiple impact zones consistent with orbital bombardment. Holloway nodded, her gaze fixed on the tactical display where red enemy icons swarmed around a lone, flickering blue friendly. Then we're not too late to crash their party. Engineering, stand by the warp jump drive. Tactical, prepare for combat pattern Texas two-step. A low thrum vibrated through the deck plates as the Alamo's revolutionary propulsion system spooled up. This wasn't your granddaddy's hyperspace, no gentle glide through alternate dimensions. The Mobius drive, or warp jump as the crew affectionately called it, was based on some seriously out there physics, theories that had made most of Earth's scientific community spit out their coffee when they were first proposed. It didn't just propel the ship, it created localized, infinitesimally brief folds in the fabric of space-time itself. For fractions of a second, the Alamo could effectively exist in multiple places almost simultaneously, or blink across vast distances in a way that defied conventional tracking. To an outside observer, especially one used to the more predictable FTL methods of the established galactic races, it was like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall while it was teleporting. Warp jump drive engaging, combat pattern Texas two-step initiated, Holloway commanded. Space itself seemed to ripple and distort around the Alamo as it surged forward, not in a straight line, but in a series of dizzying short-range jumps that painted it across the Scourge's bewildered sensor screens like a phantom. Target their lead command vessel, the big ugly one with all the pointy bits, Holloway ordered, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. Main weapons. Railgun cannons, full charge. Let's see how they like a taste of good old-fashioned kinetic persuasion. Deep within the Alamo's armored core, massive electromagnetic coils began to glow with an eerie blue light. Humanity, in its long and bloody history of trying to find better ways to throw rocks at each other, had taken a different path to interstellar weaponry. While most spacefaring races had gravitated towards energy-based systems, lasers, plasma cannons, particle beams, Earth had looked at the raw, undeniable power of simply hitting something very, very hard, with something moving very, very fast. The Alamo's primary armaments, its kinetic lances, were essentially hyper-advanced railguns, capable of accelerating multi-ton projectiles forged from super-dense alloys to a significant percentage of the speed of light. Firing solution locked on Scourge Command 1 Admiral, Jax confirmed, his eyes narrowed in concentration. 3 rounds, on your mark. Make 'em count, Jax. Fire. The Alamo gave a slight, almost imperceptible shudder as its primary weapons discharged. On the tactical display, 3 brilliant streaks erupted from the human battleship, crossing the void that separated them from the Scourge flagship in less time than it took to draw a breath. There was no dodging, no time for shields to reconfigure. The hypervelocity slugs, each carrying the kinetic energy equivalent of a small nuclear detonation, slammed into the Scourge dreadnought at precisely calculated impact points along its spine. The effect was instantaneous and utterly devastating. The dreadnought, a vessel that had shrugged off entire barges from settler capital ships, didn't just explode. It disintegrated. One moment it was there, a mountain of alien malevolence. The next it was an expanding cloud of incandescent gas and shattered metal, its internal structure collapsing under forces it was never designed to withstand. No fancy energy dissipation, no shimmering shield failures, just brutal, overwhelming kinetic impact. Aboard his crippled ship, Commander Vasquez and his bridge crew could only watch in stunned, slack-jawed disbelief as the behemoth that had orchestrated the destruction of his fleet vanished in a flash of light and rapidly expanding debris. What manner of weapons are those?" he whispered, the question hanging unanswered in the suddenly silent bridge of the starlight. The strange, blocky ship was moving again, but in a way that defied conventional navigation. It seemed to blink in and out of existence, appearing briefly at different points around the Scourge formation. Each brief appearance was marked by the catastrophic destruction of another Scourge vessel, torn apart by those terrifying, unseen projectiles. Holloway, watching the Scourge fleet begin to scatter in confusion, allowed herself a grim flicker of satisfaction. They'll adapt quickly, even these hive-minded freaks. Once they figure out what's hitting them, they'll try to swamp us. Activate point defense grid. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, launch disruptor drones. Let's show them what else we brought to this little get-together. Just then, the communications officer on the Starlight cried out, his antennae quivering. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission, audio only, from the unknown vessel." "Put it through," Vasquez ordered, still trying to process the impossible carnage he was witnessing. A calm, female voice, filtered through his ship's universal translator, filled the bridge. "This is Admiral Helena Frost of the United Earth ship Alamo. We detected your distress signal and have come to render assistance against the Dominion forces. Please hold your current position and prepare to receive evacuation shuttles for your wounded." The name was slightly different from what he'd later learn, a minor glitch in the initial, rushed translation, but the message was clear. Vasquez felt like his translator had to be malfunctioning. This primitive-looking being, from a species that wasn't even on the galactic charts, was addressing him, a veteran admiral of a recognized stellar nation, as an equal, offering assistance as if its single, ungainly vessel could actually turn the tide of a battle that had already cost him his entire defense fleet. It was preposterous. It was insane. Yet, even as the thought crossed his mind, he watched the Alamo continue its impossible dance across the stars, systematically, brutally, and efficiently eliminating Scourge ships with weapons of terrifying, incomprehensible power. He was witnessing the galaxy change, right before his very eyes, heralded by the arrival of humanity's battleship. 37 minutes. That's all it took. Less time than it takes to watch a decent Hollywood. In 37 minutes, the USS Alamo, humanity's lone sentinel in an uncaring galaxy, had systematically dismantled what was left of the Scourge attack fleet over New Hope Prime. Not a single enemy vessel remained to threaten the battered planet below. The brutal, scarred silhouette of the human battleship, once a source of bewildered alarm for Commander Vasquez, now hung in orbit like a grim, protective angel, a beacon of utterly unexpected hope. Admiral Holloway, ever the pragmatist, didn't waste time on victory laps. Medical teams and emergency supplies, drawn from the Alamo's surprisingly extensive stores, were dispatched to the surface of New Hope Prime almost before the last Scourge debris cloud had cooled. Engineering crews, specialists in patching up battle damage with whatever was at hand, a skill honed through generations of earthly conflict, were sent to assist with the crippled Starlight, Vasquez's command ship. Only then, with the immediate crisis addressed, did Holloway accept Commander Vasquez's somewhat dazed invitation to meet aboard the Lone Star Alliance liaison station, a small, fortified orbital platform that had, by sheer luck and heavy armor, survived the initial Scourge onslaught. The conference room aboard the station was austere, hastily repurposed. Vasquez, looking a decade older than he had a few hours prior, sat opposite Holloway. He'd been joined by 3 other representatives of the Lone Star Alliance who had been on the station. Ambassador Kthar of the Silicon Sentinels, a crystalline being whose multifaceted body shimmered with internal light. Diplomat Grok from the methane-breathing gas giants of Galileo, his bulky environmental suit hissing softly, and Strategist Unit 7 of the Houston Hive Mind, a multi-bodied collective consciousness whose primary interface unit, a sleek, vaguely insectoid construct, observed. Holloway with unsettlingly numerous optical sensors. "Your arrival was fortuitous, Admiral Holloway," Vasquez began, his voice still holding a note of disbelief. "Beyond fortuitous. Miraculous might be a better word." Holloway offered a slight inclination of her head, a gesture that conveyed acknowledgement without effusiveness. "We've been monitoring Scourge activity in this sector for some time, Commander. Earth is still new to interstellar travel on this scale, but we've had observation probes deployed throughout this region for nearly a standard decade." Ambassador Kthar's crystalline facets flashed with what the Universal Translator tagged as skepticism tinged with indignation. "Impossible. Our long-range sensor networks are the most sophisticated in this quadrant of the galaxy. We would have detected such devices. Any unauthorized probes would have been identified and neutralized." A thin, almost predatory smile touched Holloway's lips. It wasn't a warm expression. "With all due respect, Ambassador," she replied, her voice even and calm, "if your sensors were truly capable of detecting our discrete observation platforms, you might also have detected the Scourge fleet before they turned your forces into pulverized stardust. Perhaps your definition of sophisticated needs an update." The rebuke, sharp and undeniable, hung in the air like a charged particle. Grok gurgled something that his translator rendered as a grudging agreement. It was Strategist Unit 7 of the Houston Hive Mind that broke the silence, its synthesized voice devoid of inflection. "The human admiral makes a logically valid point. Their technological capabilities clearly operate on principles we have not yet encountered, or perhaps have dismissed as impractical. Which brings us to the purpose of this impromptu gathering." Holloway leaned forward slightly, her steel-gray eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "Earth is prepared to offer formal assistance against the Scourge threat. We have additional vessels, sister ships to the Alamo, currently under accelerated construction. Our scientists have developed technologies specifically designed to counter Scourge capabilities, as you've just witnessed." Diplomat Grok let out a series of bubbling sounds. "You have one ship, Admiral," his translator declared. "One. Impressive as your victory here was, and believe me, it was impressive, the Scourge control thousands of worlds. They command millions of vessels. What can one ship, or even a handful, truly do against such an overwhelming force? For now, yes, we have one operational battleship in this sector, Holloway acknowledged, her gaze unwavering. But humanity has something the Scourge doesn't. And frankly, Diplomat, it's something many in the established galactic community seem to have either forgotten or willfully ignored. And what is that, Admiral? Vasquez asked, genuinely curious, a sliver of hope battling the ingrained weariness in his voice. Holloway's expression didn't change, but her eyes seemed to gain an even harder edge. A history forged in relentless conflict, a deep-seated understanding of asymmetric warfare, and an unwavering willingness to stare down the barrel of extinction and not blink. We know how to fight outnumbered. We know how to innovate under pressure. We know how to win when the odds are stacked so high they scrape the damn sky. The recording of the Alamo's engagement at New Hope Prime played out in the Grand Chamber of the Lone Star Alliance High Council, a cavernous space on a heavily fortified moon deep within Alliance territory. 67 representatives from the Alliance's member species sat in stunned, disbelieving silence, having just witnessed the impossible. The complete and utter annihilation of a Scourge heavy assault fleet by a single, unknown vessel. High Chancellor Varian, a venerable Lemurian whose luminescent tendrils pulsed with agitated, shifting colors, turned his multifaceted eyes towards Commander Vasquez, who stood before the assembly. Is this recording accurate, Commander Vasquez? Unaltered, Varian's voice, a series of melodic chimes, resonated through the chamber. It is, High Chancellor, Vasquez confirmed, his voice steady. I witnessed the engagement personally. The human vessel, the USS Alamo, under the command of Admiral Helena Holloway, eliminated 29 Scourge warships, including a Dreadnought-class command ship, in less than 40 standard minutes. They suffered no discernible damage. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, chitters, and modulated tones. For decades, the Void Scourge had expanded relentlessly, a creeping, consuming darkness. World after world had fallen, their populations either slaughtered or, far worse, assimilated. Alliance forces, for all their numbers and established doctrines, had managed only to slow their advance, a series of costly delaying actions, never a decisive victory, never a true turning of the tide. And now, these humans, newcomers, barbarians, some were already whispering. And now these humans, these Earthlings, asked Representative Jollik of the Persian Conclave, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with nervous energy. They propose an alliance? On what terms? They offer their military expertise and their unique technology, Vasquez explained. Specifically, access to their advanced defensive systems and their strategic doctrines for countering Scourge tactics. In exchange, they seek formal recognition as a member species of the Lone Star Alliance, access to our star charts and certain non-military resources, and a mutual defense pact. He paused. Their Admiral Holloway has remained in the New Hope Prime system with the Alamo, providing protection while our evacuation and relief efforts continue. She has acted, in all respects, as an honorable ally. One successful engagement, however unorthodox and impressive, objected Ambassador Quill of the Centaurian Republic, a tall, equine creature known for his conservative views, does not prove these humans can stand against the full might of the Scourge. They have, as Diplomat Grok rightly pointed out, a single operational warship in this theater. The Scourge has millions. This could be a fluke, a lucky break with a new toy. The Council's chief strategic advisor, a cybernetically enhanced Lorian named Kos, whose positronic brain was a repository of galactic military history, stepped forward. His optical sensors, a dozen tiny lenses, scanned the assembly. Our preliminary analysis, based on the Alamo's sensor logs which Admiral Holloway willingly provided, suggests the human vessel employs technologies we have never encountered, operating on principles that, frankly, some of our leading physicists are calling theoretically impossible. Meaning, Advisor Kos? Pressed High Chancellor Varian. Meaning, High Chancellor, Kos replied, his synthesized voice calm, that most spacefaring civilizations, including the Scourge and ourselves, develop along broadly similar technological paths. Energy weapons, deflector shields, faster-than-light travel based on established hyperwave mechanics. The humans, they have taken different approaches. Entirely different. Their primary weapons, as you saw, are kinetic-based, delivering focused destruction on a scale previously thought unachievable with projectile weaponry. Their defensive systems, if they can even be called that in the traditional sense, utilize principles of localized space-time distortion we barely understand. And their propulsion method, this warp jump drive, it appears to violate several fundamental laws of physics as we currently comprehend them. Coast displayed a simplified schematic of the Alamo on the main holographic display. They are, in essence, fighting a different kind of war. "How is this even possible?" demanded Representative Jollick, his mandibles agitated. "They are newcomers to interstellar travel. Their homeworld is relatively primitive by galactic standards." It was Commander Vasquez who answered, recalling his conversations with Admiral Holloway. According to Admiral Holloway, Chancellor, humans devoted significant resources, a vast percentage of their planetary output, to warfare throughout much of their recorded history. When they finally achieved global unity and looked to the stars, they didn't abandon this focus. They redirected it. They prepared for threats they hadn't yet encountered, theorizing, innovating, pushing the boundaries of what they thought was possible, driven by a deep-seated species memory of existential conflict. The council chamber erupted in a flurry of overlapping conversations as representatives debated the implications. This wasn't just a new weapon, it was a new philosophy of combat, born from a history alien to most of the peace-accustomed Alliance members. High Chancellor Varian raised a tendril for silence. "The question before us is not how the humans developed these capabilities, though that is a matter for future study. The question is whether an alliance with them, under their proposed terms, serves the interests of the Lone Star Alliance in this desperate hour." He turned his gaze back to Vasquez. "Commander, you have spent the most time in direct contact with these humans, with this Admiral Holloway. What is your personal assessment?" Vasquez considered carefully before answering, acutely aware of the weight his words carried. "They are unsettling, High Chancellor. They think differently, their solutions are often brutal in their efficiency, and their history, as I understand it, is troubling. But their actions at New Hope Prime saved countless lives. Their continued presence has prevented further scourge attacks in that sector. Admiral Holloway has been direct, honest, and her ship's capabilities are undeniable." He paused, then met Varian's gaze. "I believe an alliance would be beneficial, perhaps even essential. But it must be an alliance with clear boundaries and vigilant oversight. The humans possess a military prowess we desperately need, but their potential for disruption should not be underestimated. They are a wildfire, Chancellor, capable of clearing away the deadwood, but also capable of burning out of control if not handled with extreme care and respect." Chancellor Varian's tendrils pulsed slowly, a thoughtful rhythm. "Very well. We will dispatch a formal diplomatic delegation to meet with Admiral Holloway and these humans to explore the precise terms of this proposed cooperation." He was about to continue when a piercing alarm cut through the chamber. The central holographic display, which had been showing the Alamo schematic, flared red and activated automatically, showing a heavily damaged Alliance scout vessel, trailing debris and plasma. "Emergency transmission," announced the communications officer, his voice tight with urgency. "Incoming from the Epsilon sector. The Scourge has launched a major offensive against the Trinity Sun system. 3 planetary colonies, including 2 major population centers, are under direct attack. Initial reports indicate multiple Scourge battle fleets." The Council watched in horror as the scouts' last, fragmented footage played across the screen. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of Scourge capital ships descending like a plague of locusts upon the largely defenseless Trinity Sun's worlds. Billions of lives hung in the balance. Advisor Kosa's voice was grim. "Our nearest combined response fleet, even at maximum emergency speed, is a minimum of 2 standard days away from the Trinity Suns. They won't make it in time. The system's token defense force will be overwhelmed within hours." A heavy silence fell over the chamber, the weight of impending doom pressing down on every representative. Then Commander Vasquez stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the despair. "High Chancellor," he said, a new urgency in his tone, "the USS Alamo, by my calculations, if they leave immediately, they are less than 6 standard hours from the Trinity Sun's system." All eyes, all optical sensors, all multifaceted gazes in the chamber snapped to Vasquez, then to the image of the brutal, scarred human battleship still displayed on a secondary screen. 6 hours. 1 ship. Against an armada. Chancellor Varian's luminescent tendrils twisted in distress, a knot of desperate hope and terrifying risk. "Contact the humans," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Contact Admiral Holloway. Request, no, implore their assistance." Aboard the USS Alamo, still on station over New Hope Prime, Admiral Holloway reviewed the urgent, datapack transmission from the Lone Star Alliance Council. The tactical situation in the Trinity Sun system was, to put it mildly, a goddamn nightmare. 3 habitable planets, combined sentient population, well over 12 billion souls, defended by a local security force that amounted to little more than glorified Coast Guard cutters. And bearing down on them? A scourge armada of unprecedented size, clearly intended not just as a conquest, but as a statement, a brutal rebuttal to the Alliance's newfound, human-inspired hope. Holloway looked up from the holographic display at her senior officers, gathered in the Alamo's compact strategic command center. Commander Alejandro Alex Rodriguez, her executive officer, a man whose calm demeanor masked a razor-sharp tactical mind honed in simulations and the few, brief skirmishes Earth had engaged in at the fringes of its explored space. Dr. Elisa Evie Hayes, the ship's chief science officer, a whirlwind of nervous energy and brilliance, the primary architect behind many of the Alamo's more unconventional systems, including the Mobius drive. Lieutenant Commander Jax Jackson, already running preliminary trajectory calculations. Thoughts? Holloway asked, her voice low and even. Rodriguez, his dark eyes fixed on the overwhelming red icons representing the Scourge fleet, didn't mince words. It's a trap, Admiral. A damn big one. The Scourge knows we intervened at New Hope Prime. They saw what the Alamo can do. This isn't just a random planetary grab. They're counting on us to respond. They're baiting us into a kill box. Dr. Hayes nodded, pushing her glasses further up her nose. Agreed. The Scourge operates with a distributed hive consciousness, but it learns. Every ship we destroyed at New Hope Prime, every weapon system we deployed, transmitted data back to their collective before being eliminated. They'll have analyzed our capabilities, our tactics with the warp jump, the effectiveness of the kinetic lances. They'll have adapted their strategies. They'll be expecting us this time, and they'll have countermeasures. Holloway nodded slowly, her gaze sweeping across the tactical display, already seeing the patterns, the choke points, the deadly geometry of the Scourge deployment. So, they're expecting us. That doesn't mean we won't go. It just means we can't give them the fight they're anticipating. She looked at Rodriguez. We'll be outnumbered, Alex. At least 50 to 1 in capital ships alone, probably more once you factor in their support craft. Even with the Mobius drive and our advanced weapon systems, those aren't good odds if we fight them head-on their way. Then we change the game, Holloway stated, a spark igniting in her steel-gray eyes. She manipulated the holographic display, her fingers dancing across the controls, highlighting specific orbital mechanics, asteroid clusters, and gravitational anomalies within the Trinity Sun system. They think they understand how we fight now. They've seen us do the Texas two-step. They're expecting a single, fast-moving, hard-hitting ship. Let's show them they haven't even begun to understand what humanity brings to a brawl. She outlined her plan quickly, concisely. It was audacious. It was potentially reckless. It flew in the face of every conventional military doctrine ever written, human or alien. It involved pushing the Alamo's experimental systems to their absolute breaking point and beyond. And it was, Holloway wagered, precisely what the rigid, hierarchically minded Scourge couldn't anticipate. When she finished, silence hung in the small command center. Alex Rodriguez was the first to speak, his voice carefully neutral. That's extremely high risk, Admiral. If any one of those system integrations fails, if the Mobius drive destabilizes under that kind of sustained multi-vector stress. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew the catastrophic potential. High risk, high reward, Commander, Holloway countered, her voice firm. The Scourge expects conventional tactics, even if our technology is unconventional. They expect us to try and pick off their stragglers, hit their command ships, the usual playbook. But humanity's greatest military advantage, the one thing that saw us survive our own brutal history, has always been our ability to adapt, to innovate under fire, to think so far outside the box that the box itself ceases to exist. She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each of her officers. I won't order anyone to participate in this operation if they have reservations. This is beyond our original mission parameters. This could be construed as an act of offensive warfare rather than a defensive action, a direct challenge to the Scourge Empire. There's no shame in. One by one, Rodriguez, then Hayes, then Jackson, then the others nodded their acceptance. Not a single one declined. They were spacers, explorers, scientists, yes. But they were also the crew of Earth's first battleship, and they understood the stakes. They understood the silent, unspoken oath they'd all taken. Very well, Holloway said, a ghost of a proud smile touching her lips. Commander Rodriguez, inform the Lone Star Alliance Council we're en route to the Trinity Suns. Advise them to prepare for unconventional support. Dr. Hayes, I need your team to begin reconfiguring the Mobius drive for sustained, distributed operational capability. It's going to scream, Evie, but make it sing. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, prepare the Raven drones for wide-spectrum, distributed deployment. I want every Scourge comm channel, every sensor net, every targeting computer in that system to have a very, very bad day. As her officers departed to carry out their orders, the quiet hum of the Alamo beginning to thrum with a new, more urgent energy, Holloway remained at the tactical display. She studied the Scourge fleet positions, the vast, overwhelming numbers. What she was planning went against every instinct, every carefully calculated strategic principle that had defined her long career. But they weren't fighting a conventional enemy. And they weren't fighting with conventional weapons or conventional minds. They were fighting as humans always had when their backs were against the wall. With ingenuity, with adaptability, with a stubborn refusal to lie down and die, and with a breathtaking, terrifying willingness to take risks that more established, more civilized species would consider utterly, certifiably insane. The Scourge wanted a trap. She'd give them a goddamn maelstrom. High Overlord Kratos, a towering figure of gleaming chrome and pulsing bioluminescent cabling, surveyed the unfolding conquest of the Trinity Suns system from the command nexus of his flagship, the Scourge Ascendant. His original biological form, lost to the ages and countless cybernetic augmentations, was a distant memory. For over 3 standard centuries, Kratos had existed as a favored instrument of the Dominion Collective, a being of pure, cold strategic intellect, overseeing the assimilation of 17 star systems and the processing of countless billions. The operation here was proceeding exactly as the Collective had calculated. The pathetic local defense systems had been neutralized within the first hour. Harvester ships, colossal, nightmarish refineries, were already descending through the atmospheres of Trinity Prime and its sister colonies, their atmospheric entry a fiery promise of oblivion for the helpless populations below. Status of our interdiction sensor network? Kratos' voice was a synthesized baritone, devoid of emotion, flowing from a vocalizer embedded in his metallic chest plate. His second-in-command, Sub-Overlord Vex, a more recent, though no less ruthless, addition to the Scourge hierarchy, responded with crisp efficiency. Fully operational, High Overlord. All standard FTL exit vectors are saturated with detection grids and pre-targeted disruptor fields. Nothing will enter this system without our immediate knowledge. Kratos' multi-lensed optical sensors, capable of perceiving a dozen different spectrums simultaneously, remained fixed on the holographic representation of the Trinity Suns. The humans, they were an anomaly, an unexpected variable in the Collective's grand equation. Their unexpected and, frankly, embarrassing intervention at New Hope Prime had cost the Scourge valuable resources, 24 warships, including a frontline dreadnought. But more importantly, it had demonstrated a level of technological and tactical unpredictability the Collective had not encountered in millennia. Such dangerous innovation, such chaotic potential, could not be allowed to spread. It had to be cauterized, excised from the galactic body politic before it infected others. The human vessel, this Alamo, Kratos stated, the words a pronouncement of inevitable fact. It will come. The Collective's predictive analysis indicates a 98.73% probability they will attempt to intervene. Their psychological profile, based on the Marasian engagement and subsequent transmissions, suggests an ingrained, almost pathological, hero complex. Our forces are prepared, High Overlord, Vex confirmed, a hint of eager anticipation in his synthesized voice. The moment they exit FTL at any of the predictable gravitational well points, our entire fleet, over 70 capital ships, 300 support cruisers, and 1,000 interceptor drones, will converge upon their position. No single vessel, regardless of its purported capabilities, can withstand such concentrated firepower. We will dissect it, piece by piece, and its secrets will be added to the glory of the Scourge. Kratos' artificial eyes narrowed, a micro-adjustment that conveyed a depth of thought few could fathom. Do not underestimate these humans, Vex. Their approach to warfare differs fundamentally from established galactic patterns. The Collective has analyzed their tactics from the engagement at New Hope Prime. Their reliance on kinetic weaponry is primitive, yet undeniably effective against current shielding paradigms. Their FTL method is erratic, difficult to track, but it has limitations. It requires clear exit vectors, time to recharge between jumps. We have accounted for these variables. Indeed, High Overlord, Vex affirmed. Our trap is perfectly laid. An alarm, a discordant shriek that cut through the usual hum of the Ascendant's command nexus, interrupted him. On the main tactical display, not one, but dozens of small, fleeting energy anomalies appeared simultaneously, scattered like dandelion seeds across the entire breadth of the Trinity Sun system. Not at the edges, not at the predictable FTL jump points, but everywhere. What is this? Kratos demanded, his synthesized voice for the first time carrying a fractional hint of something other than cold certainty. Report. Unknown. High Overlord, the sensor technician stammered, his own biomechanical interfaces struggling to process the flood of contradictory data. They appear to be some form of quantum disturbance, localized space-time fluctuations, but our sensors cannot resolve a clear origin point or stable signature. They are too numerous, too dispersed. And then the tactical display erupted into utter, unmitigated chaos as something truly, fundamentally impossible happened. The human battleship, the USS Alamo, didn't appear at the system's edge as expected, a single, defiant speck against the might of the Scourge Armada. Instead, it seemed to materialize simultaneously, at multiple points throughout the system, directly alongside key Scourge capital ships, deep within their supposedly impenetrable formations. One moment there was empty space, the next the brutal, scarred hull of the Alamo was there, railgun cannons already glowing with malevolent energy. Impossible! Vex exclaimed, his earlier confidence shattering like brittle glass. No FTL technology can achieve such widespread, instantaneous, localized materialization. It violates every known law of translight physics. Kratos watched, a new and deeply unsettling sensation, something akin to alarm, beginning to register in his positronic brain, as his meticulously positioned fleet began to report catastrophic damage from multiple vectors simultaneously. The human vessel, or rather vessels, were somehow attacking dozens of targets at once, their devastating kinetic lances tearing through Scourge cruisers and destroyers before they could even bring their own weapons to bear or reconfigure their shields for such an unorthodox, multi-directional assault. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughterhouse, and his ships were the bewildered cattle. Order all vessels to converge on the human ship's primary location. Kratos commanded, his processors struggling to reconcile the incoming data with established combat doctrine. We cannot determine its primary location, High Overlord. Vex replied, genuine fear, an emotion his cybernetic reconditioning should have eradicated, seeping into his synthetic voice for the first time in his long, bloody service. It appears to exist at multiple points in space-time simultaneously. Each instance is registering as a fully operational combatant. On the display, Kratos watched in growing horror as small, agile objects detached from each ghostly iteration of the human vessel. Unmanned drones, sleek and black, that immediately swarmed towards his ships, not targeting hulls or shields, but zeroing in on weapon systems, engine nacelles, and critically, command and control sensor arrays. The collective had not anticipated this capability. For the first time in over 100 standard years, High Overlord Kratos felt the cold, unfamiliar touch of uncertainty. Aboard the USS Alamo, the real one, the single point of reality from which this madness was being orchestrated, Admiral Helena Holloway gripped the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white. The entire ship shuddered and groaned under the unimaginable strain of the modified Mobius drive. Warning lights flickered across consoles like angry fireflies. Drive stability at 78% and falling, Admiral, reported Chief Engineer Commander Park, his voice tight but controlled over the comm. The containment fields are fluctuating wildly. We can maintain this multi-iteration configuration for another 4 minutes, maybe 5 if we push it past every red line we've got. That's all the time we need, Commander Park, Holloway replied, her eyes glued to the tactical display, a maelstrom of friendly blue icons tearing through a sea of panicked red. What they were attempting should have been beyond impossible. The Mobius drive was designed for limited, short-duration tactical blinks, localized folds in space-time to outmaneuver an opponent. What Dr. Hayes and her team had jury-rigged, what they were doing now, creating multiple, semi-stable, weaponized iterations of the Alamo across the entire Trinity Sun system, was pushing the technology and the very fabric of reality far beyond its intended parameters, far beyond what any sane physicist would deem advisable. To the Scourge, it appeared as if they were fighting not one human battleship, but dozens. Each Phantom Alamo seemed terrifyingly real, each one capable of delivering those devastating kinetic strikes, each one a fully independent combat unit. Raven drones deployed from all iterations, Admiral. Jax Jackson reported from Tactical, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and adrenaline. Targeting Scourge command and control systems, sensor nets, and intership communication relays. The remote autonomous vectors for electronic neutralization are sowing chaos across their networks. The Raven drones were another uniquely human innovation, born from centuries of earthly cyber warfare. Instead of focusing solely on physical destruction, these sophisticated drones attacked the Scourge's networked hive mind itself, injecting cascading failures, false sensor readings, and contradictory command signals throughout their meticulously coordinated communication systems. Dominion fleet showing significant signs of coordination breakdown, Admiral. Jax continued, a grin threatening to break through his professional composure. Their response times are lagging, and we're seeing contradictory maneuvers. Some units are even firing on friendly vessels in the confusion. Holloway nodded grimly. The Scourge's greatest strength, its collective consciousness, its perfect, instantaneous coordination, was, under this unprecedented assault, becoming its greatest vulnerability. The Ravens were introducing just enough digital noise, just enough chaos into their usually pristine system, to disrupt their hierarchical command structure, turning their perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction into a discordant, self-destructive cacophony. Drive stability at 62% and critical, Admiral. Park's voice crackled, strained. She's starting to tear herself apart at the quantum level. We gotta pull the plug on this ghost show now. Understood, Chief, Holloway acknowledged. Begin Phase 2. All iterations, launch full payload of kinetic distortion missiles. Target designated concentrations of Scourge capital ships. Then collapse the field. The multiple iterations of the USS Alamo, those ghostly warriors that had thrown the Scourge Armada into disarray, began to flicker and fade, the tortured space-time folds resolving back into a single, unified point of reality. But not before each and every Phantom ship launched its final, devastating payload, a volley of specialized missiles that arced directly towards the heart of the remaining, bewildered Scourge formations. Mobius drive deactivating now, Park announced, a wave of relief and exhaustion in his voice. We're back to normal space, Admiral. One ship, one reality. Hope it was enough. The tactical display updated, showing the single battered but unbowed USS Alamo now positioned near Arcturus Prime, the most populated of the system's planets, its shields flickering but holding. Around them, the Scourge fleet was a scene of utter devastation. Dozens of their warships were shattered hulks, drifting aimlessly. Others were crippled, venting atmosphere and plasma. Still more were firing erratically, their targeting systems compromised by the Raven drone assault. And then the kinetic distortion missiles, another terrifying innovation from Dr. Hayes's Think Outside the Universe skunk works, detonated. Unlike conventional explosives, these weapons didn't just go boom. They released precisely calculated, intensely focused pulses of gravitational distortion, another dangerous application of the same esoteric principles that powered the Mobius drive. The effect on the tightly packed Scourge vessels was catastrophic. Localized, artificial gravity wells, more powerful than a small black hole for a microsecond, tore their ships apart from the inside out. Hulls buckled and imploded, superstructures twisted into unrecognizable pretzels of alien metal, reactors overloaded as their containment fields were ripped asunder by forces they were never meant to encounter. It was a silent, brutal, physics-defying ballet of destruction. Scourge flagship, the Ascendant, located, Admiral. Jax called out, his voice tight with triumph. They're attempting to rally their remaining forces. Looks like Kratos himself is trying to make a run for it. Holloway's eyes, cold as the void between stars, fixed on the red icon of the enemy flagship. Target their command ship, Mr. Jackson. All remaining kinetic lances. Maximum charge. Let's send High Overlord Kratos a personal message from Earth. The Alamo's main weapons, battered but still functional, powered up one final, defiant time. 3 hypervelocity projectiles, messengers of humanity's brutal ingenuity, streaked across the war-torn space toward the fleeing Dominion flagship. High Overlord Kratos knew the battle was lost, knew his life was measured in seconds, even before he saw the human projectiles tearing towards his vessel on the main view screen. In 3 centuries of unwavering service to the Dominion Collective, he had never witnessed such a complete, such an utter tactical and strategic defeat. The humans had not simply outfought them. They had outthought them. They had changed the fundamental nature of space combat itself, twisted the very laws of physics into weapons, and wielded chaos like a conductor's baton. As the kinetic lances impacted the Ascendant, tearing through its supposedly impenetrable armor as if it were parchment paper, Kratos' final, emergency data burst to the collective contained not a plea for aid, not a lament of failure, but a stark, terrified warning that would echo through the Scourge hive mind for generations to come. The humans, they do not fight as we do. They do not think as we do. They are not bound by the limitations we understand. They are dangerous beyond all measure. Adapt, or perish. Then, the Scourge Ascendant, and High Overlord Kratos with it, ceased to exist. The Trinity Sun system fell silent, save for the crackle of dying ships and the stunned transmissions of the surviving, liberated colonists. 3 standard days. That's how long it took for the shockwaves of the Battle of the Trinity Suns to ripple through the Lone Star Alliance, and indeed, echo into the dark territories of the Scourge Dominion. 3 days for the initial, almost hysterical reports from the liberated colonists to be verified, for Alliance scout ships to cautiously enter the system and confirm the unbelievable. The Scourge Armada, a force that should have effortlessly glassed 3 planets, was not just defeated, not just repelled, but annihilated. Wreckage fields stretched for thousands of miles, a grim testament to the Alamo's fury. The Scourge, for the first time in living memory, were in full retreat from an entire sector. When Admiral Helena Iron Holloway next stood before the full Galactic Coalition Council, no longer the Lone Star Alliance, as new, tentative members were already petitioning to join in the wake of humanity's stunning victories, the atmosphere was profoundly different from her cautious, almost skeptical reception at Meraxia. The Grand Chamber, packed with representatives from 67 distinct species, buzzed not with disbelief, but with a potent cocktail of awe, profound respect, and a healthy, lingering dose of outright fear. The humans, these loud, unpredictable newcomers from a galactic backwater, had done the impossible not once, but twice. The Trinity Sun system is secure, Holloway reported, her voice calm and measured, though the fatigue of the recent battle still clung to her like a shroud. The Alamo, currently undergoing emergency repairs by its own crew and a hastily assembled team of Alliance engineers, remained on station, a silent, scarred guardian. Dominion Scourge forces have retreated from the sector entirely. We've provided your technical teams with preliminary schematics for countermeasures against their return, focusing on disrupting their network cohesion and exploiting the vulnerabilities we identified in their command structure. High Chancellor Varian, his luminescent tendrils glowing with a kaleidoscope of intense colors that the human translator identified as expressions of profound respect, cautious optimism, and existential trepidation, in roughly equal measure, inclined his magnificent head. Admiral Holloway, his melodic voice resonated, carrying a weight it hadn't before. In the space of 1 standard week, your single vessel, the USS Alamo, has accomplished what entire fleets of coalition ships could not achieve in decades of brutal conflict. You have not just pushed back the darkness, you have shown us that the darkness can be pushed back. The Council, Admiral, has voted unanimously, without a single dissenting voice, to accept Earth's proposal for full alliance and membership within this newly invigorated galactic coalition. Holloway allowed herself a small, formal nod. Earth is pleased and honored to join the coalition. Our additional battleships, the San Jacinto and the Goliad, will be operational and en route to designated coalition sectors within 6 standard months. We are prepared to share defensive technologies, including our advanced point defense grids and the principles behind our kinetic barrier systems, immediately. Training cadres for your engineers and tactical officers can be dispatched forthwith. A hush fell over the chamber. This was more than they had dared hope for. But Representative Jalik of the Persian Conclave, his chitinous exoskeleton still clicking, though perhaps with less nervousness and more eager curiosity now, voiced the question on everyone's mind. And your offensive capabilities, Admiral? The warp jump drive? Those gravitic distortion missiles? The ability to project multiple instances of your vessel? Will these formidable assets also be shared with your new allies? A ghost of a smile, enigmatic and unreadable, touched Holloway's lips. It was the kind of smile that made seasoned poker players fold their hands. Those, she stated, her voice polite but with an underlying firmness that brooked no argument, will remain Earth's unique contribution to the Alliance's strategic capabilities. There are certain technologies, certain philosophies of warfare, that require extensive training, a specific cultural context, and frankly, a level of operational discipline that takes generations to instill, to employ safely and effectively. We wouldn't want any unfortunate interstellar accidents due to misuse or misunderstanding, would we? The unspoken message hung heavy in the chamber, clear as a West Texas night sky. Humans would fight alongside the coalition. They would defend its worlds, its peoples. They would share the tools to build better walls. But the biggest, sharpest, most terrifying teeth in their arsenal? Those would remain uniquely, unequivocally human. You could invite the wolf into your camp for protection, but you didn't ask it to teach you how to bite quite so hard. Not yet, anyway. As the formal ceremony of Earth's induction into the Galactic Coalition proceeded, with pledges of mutual support and grand pronouncements of a new era of cooperation, Commander Miguel Vasquez, now a celebrated hero for his resilience at New Hope Prime and his early championing of the Human Alliance, approached Admiral Holloway privately. The two stood by a large viewport, looking out at the swirling nebulae that cradled the Coalition's capital. "You've changed everything, Admiral," Vasquez said quietly, his voice a mixture of awe and a lingering unease he couldn't quite shake. The balance of power in the galaxy, the fundamental nature of interstellar relations, the very future of the Coalition itself. It will never be the same. Holloway watched a distant star cluster flare into brilliance. "Change was already coming, Commander," she replied, her voice softer now, without the hard edge it held in council or on the bridge. "The Scourge made sure of that. They were a cancer, consuming everything. We just accelerated the timeline. Perhaps provided a more aggressive form of chemotherapy." She gave a wry, tired smile. "And what happens?" Vasquez pressed, voicing the question that now haunted the dreams of many galactic leaders. "When the Scourge is defeated, when this great, unifying war is finally over, what role will humanity, with its formidable capabilities, play in a peaceful galaxy? Will you lay down your arms then, Admiral?" Holloway turned from the viewport, her steel-gray eyes, which had stared down armadas and witnessed the birth and death of stars, met his. There was a depth in them, a profound understanding of conflict and its costs, but also a spark of something else, something Vasquez hadn't seen before. A flicker of hope? "When the Scourge is gone, Commander," she said, her voice thoughtful, "we'll build things instead of destroying them. We'll explore those nebulae instead of just fighting under them. We'll learn from your science, your art, your philosophies, all the incredible things that millennia of relative peace have allowed your civilizations to perfect while we back on Earth. We're still clawing our way out of the mud, still learning how not to destroy ourselves before we even reached for the stars." She gestured towards the assembled representatives in the chamber below, a vibrant tapestry of alien forms and cultures. "We have so much to learn, so much to offer beyond the ability to wage war. Imagine what human ingenuity, that same restless drive that created the Alamo, could achieve when turned towards creation instead of destruction, towards understanding instead of conquest." A genuine, almost wistful smile touched her lips. "We'll trade our railgun schematics for your agricultural breakthroughs, our tactical simulations for your philosophical treatises. We'll finally have the time, the peace, to become the kind of galactic citizens we always hoped we could be." She paused, and the smile faded slightly, replaced by that familiar, unyielding resolve. "But, Commander," she added, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the weight of an unbreakable vow, "we will always remember how to fight. We'll keep the Alamo and her sisters ready. We'll keep our skills sharp. We will maintain the capacity to be the storm, just in case another one ever gathers on the horizon. It's in our blood, that preparedness. You could say it's the human way. Hope for the best, plan for the worst, and always make sure you know how to stand your ground when the universe decides to get ugly." As Admiral Miguel Vasquez watched the human return to the council proceedings, a leader now among leaders, he couldn't quite decide whether her final words were a promise of enduring protection or a subtle, chilling warning of humanity's enduring nature. Perhaps, he mused, they were both. The galaxy had trembled when humanity's battleship entered the war. How much more, he wondered, would it change, now that humans, with all their terrifying potential and their unexpected, profound hope, had truly come to stay? The new dawn was here, but its light was cast by a star unlike any the galaxy had ever known. "Alright, so what's the big takeaway from this whole cosmic rodeo, besides the fact that you don't mess with Texas, or apparently Earth? It ain't just about having the biggest guns, though the Alamo sure proved that helps. The real lesson, etched in starlight and scourge wreckage, is that our greatest strength, the thing that truly makes us formidable, isn't just our tech or our tactics. It's our grit, our stubborn refusal to lie down when the universe kicks us in the teeth. Think about it. Humanity, the scrappy underdogs, showed up to a galactic gunfight armed with a history of never giving up. While older, maybe wiser civilizations had forgotten the sting of true desperation, humans remembered. That adaptability, that willingness to tear up the rulebook and write a new one mid-battle, fueled by generations of facing down the impossible? That's the core of it. So whether you're facing down a Scourge Armada or just a tough Tuesday, remember that innovation born from necessity and an unshakable belief in your ability to change the game can make even the most outmatched contender a force to be reckoned with. Sometimes, being underestimated is your greatest weapon. The Alamo showed the galaxy what humans are made of. If you were Admiral Holloway, what's one unconventional, maybe even crazy Texan tactic you'd pull to shock an alien armada? Drop your wildest strategies below, smash that like, subscribe for more epic tales, and share this to brainstorm with your crew.